Well, good morning, Shiloh Ranch Church family. We're so glad that you're here online with us. Levi and I are excited to be hanging out with you guys. We've been reading your comments. We've been replying to your comments, and it's just so wonderful to see everyone's faces today. I'm going to hand it off to Levi. He's going to talk about how you can share the stream. And yeah.
Well, make sure you hit that share button. And
this is Levi's first time on air
with your friends.
Yeah, share the stream with your friends, and we can reach a lot of people. I think we've been averaging like 20,000 people almost that we've been reaching, which is so great. And you guys are a part of that. So we're so glad that you're here. We're going to get ready to jump into the service. What you're going to see next is a video that the awesome media team put together, which Levi's a part of that, as well as Jacob and some few other people. And so you'll see this 1017 project update about when we hit 100,000 pounds donated to, I think, over like 40 food banks now. Yeah. So that's super awesome. And yeah, that's what you're going to see. We'll be here hanging out in the chat. So make sure and say hello and where you're watching from. And we're going to go into church.
In 2014, we launched the 1017 project. It's a nonprofit dedicated to sending our roping steers, when they're done being roped, through the food banks, the after-school programs, the shelters that provide food for those that are considered food insecure. Since 2014, we have donated over 400,000 meals. To give you an idea of what that weighs, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 7 school buses. Team Ropers, that's like 134,000 Coors Light cans. We're excited about what we've accomplished, whether it be the events or the culture or everything that we've donated. We're more excited about where we see this going in the future. We think that this model could be replicated and used to eradicate food insecurity.
Okay, Jordan's mentioned a couple of times that Barna came out with a study that since the COVID thing has happened, 1 in 3 people have not returned to the church. That includes online as well. But it's even higher for the millennials. The millennials, 50% have not returned to church since this has happened. And this just brings to light the fact that it's even more difficult for people to come to church than it was before, and there's so many obstacles in the way. And so when we ask you if you can just take a second and follow our different platforms, we've got YouTube, you can subscribe, we've got our Facebook page, you're on it right now, you can just hit that like or follow button. Instagram, we have some cool stuff coming up on Instagram. And we have a podcast channel. All these different ways are in an effort to make it as easy as possible for people to attend church. So every time that you follow something or start a watch party or share it to your Facebook page or your Instagram, people, your friends, even not your friends, are able to see what goes on here. And it's like bringing church to them in a way that's not invasive. So I know it just gets easy to tune it out, but just truly it's making a difference. You guys are making a significant impact. Keep up the good work.
This again in this place. Fill us up as we overflow with faith. For your honor and fame. Fall again in this place. Fill us up as we overflow with praise. For your honor and fame. Fall again in this place. Fill us up as we overflow with praise. We come with expectation. Everything a man. Look and see the glory of our God. Oh, lift your voice to heaven. Jesus is our end. Celebrate the wonder of his love. This is a holy moment. Yes, this is a holy moment. One more time. Oh, this is a holy moment. I've carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. Dying your invitation to let it all go. I see it now. I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. I run to the Father, fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your son for redemption, the price for my heart. And I don't have a context for that kind of love. I don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again. So my heart has been in your sights long before my first breath, running into your arms is running to life from death. And I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out. Just as I am, you pull me in, and I know I need you now. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again. So, again and again and again and again. Father, we do run to your arms this morning again, once more. We come to you. We believe that you're a good Father, that you know exactly what we need. You know us well, Father, and so we just present our hearts to you. We present our minds to you. We ask you to open us up, expand our hearts and our minds, God. Make us more like you, and bless this time that we have together. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
There is nothing more giving in this world than a young teenager who thinks they're in love. They think about it all the time. They give it their time. They'll spend money buying gifts and presents. And as a youth pastor, it was something I would always observe. Young people who think they're in love will give and give and give. And the function of giving is more related to love than the law. Jesus talked about giving. Jesus talked about generosity and all the things that go along with the law portion of giving. But the reality is, giving is directly correlated to the love that we feel for something. It's easy to give to something that we love, and so anytime somebody goes, ugh, giving, it's an indicator that maybe we've started to think of God more like an ex-girlfriend. Maybe we've started to think about God as something that doesn't excite us, that doesn't bring about passion anymore. And if we start to gear ourselves away from discussing or thinking about or talking about giving, what we're doing is we're giving into the loss of the love that we feel for God. When God does something specifically, uniquely personal on our behalf, the first reaction, the first thing that we feel is this desire to give. You can go through the gospel, people have this reaction of wanting to give. And so let me just clarify this point, that we will continue to talk about giving. We will continue to urge, not only from the legal standpoint, because honestly, nothing that we talk about from a legal standpoint really sticks. But if you feel hesitation about the concept of giving, if you feel hesitation about someone talking about giving, understand giving and love are so closely connected that the people who feel the most loving towards who God is never have a hesitation with it. Here's my buyout. You're like, oh, he's just saying that because it's going to benefit the church. Give to another church if it's a problem. If you think we talk about giving too much, no problem. Give somewhere else. But don't remove yourself from the loving act of giving and contributing and being a part of something that God's doing. You can send mail to P.O. Box 177, Powell, Butte, Oregon, 97753. You can jump on the app, Shiloh Ranch Church app, any of the app stores on your phone. You can go to 77977, text 77977, text the word Shiloh Ranch with no spaces. It pops up on our giving platform. You can find us online. We have made it as easy as we possibly can to participate in that process, and we believe that you're going to. If you're watching online, please know we consider that what you are being a part of on the online campus is just as much as the people who are here in person. Don't feel like that you're an auxiliary function. You are us. We love that you're a part of it. We love that you're here. We appreciate you showing up. We also want to encourage you to be a part of the giving.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to get ready to go into the sermon this morning. And we feel like as a leadership team, this is an awesome message that people need to hear right now. It's just all about desperation and how God just swoops in and helps us in time of need. So we're excited for you to get to hear this.
This is, again, a great opportunity to share the sermon on your Facebook right now. That allows your friends and family to be able to see it or find it easily later. So also helps the church out, and we'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. It's funny because this morning we had our first service here in Powell, Butte, and when I was listening to the sermon, and I knew what was coming in worship just after the sermon, it was so cool to see just how hand in hand the sermon and the second half of worship went together. And that's not something we plan, and so it's cool to see when God does that. So make sure to stick around for the sermon right now and stick around for worship as well, because it's really awesome. But we will see you guys in a minute.
We are rolling. We are rolling. It is a good time to be. Hey, I tell you what, it's a good time to be on the sidelines watching life right now. It's a good time to just be observing, even from a church perspective, to see like, where's this going? You know, I've talked to pastor friends like, where are we going with this? People that own businesses, people that are like managing people or employees, and they're like, you know, it seems like things are okay. We're doing okay, but there's so much chaos, and where's the chaos going to go? And I feel it from the church perspective. I feel it because like our in-person attendance obviously has dropped off. We haven't been able to do kids' church in a while.
It's coming. But the online thing has just exploded. It's doing really, really well. And so you're kind of measuring like, where are we? Where are we actually? What are the actual numbers? See, if I was going to build a house, there are specs, there are measurements, there are definitive, clear results. And I think what's so crazy to me right now is it seems like everything is nebulous. Everything in the world is so hard to measure. Success is hard to measure in our lives right now. We go to work, but is there even going to be a job next year? We're wearing masks. Is that working? Like, are we like the doctors? But do they know? And just everything is hard to nail down. We had a rope in here last week, and it was the weirdest thing. I can't even explain to you. I'll tell you what happened, but I can't explain why. We've got this water reel, and this water reel, you hook it to a four-wheeler or a truck, and you drive it to the end of the arena, and when you turn it on, it makes this click, 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 and it just pulls it all the way back, and by the time it's over, the arena is watered, so you don't have to rope and dust. And it wasn't working. It wasn't working, and what was crazy, come to find out, Hunter Hicks, thank God for Hunter Hicks, we get to messing with it, and it wasn't reeling back in like it was supposed to. And what we found is that the hose had fallen out of alignment. The hose has to be in alignment, and if the hose is not lined up, it gets bound up, it gets sort of twisted in there, everything gets bound up, and the progress stops. And so the sprinkler was working, but it wasn't moving. And so that evening we messed with it, and Hunter did what Hunter does. He's just a typical Hicks, just a problem solver, and he messes with it and gets it working. And it's not long until eventually the reel is lined up where direction is good, straight. The sprinkler is working, and it's just going click, click, click. It's gathering in, it's sprinkling in. And so here's what I was going to tell you. Lacey and I are sitting there, and if you know me, you know I don't like being bored. I don't like sitting around. I don't like having nothing to do. And I sat there, and I watched that sprinkler, I'm not kidding, for like 2 hours. There was something so deeply, like I said, I can't explain it in a way that makes sense, but there was something so deeply satisfying about watching something that's measurable. In a world where everything is immeasurable, it's nebulous, is this working, is this good, are we going the right direction? To just sit and watch something that is measurably working, it caused me to realize how much of life is just chaos right now. Take that for what you will. I loved it. Farmers, you probably understand a little bit what I'm talking about, just when something's working. If you could sum up the conflict that we're facing in this country, the conflict that we're facing with each other, whether it's political or governmental or systematic or, the World Health Organization, CDC versus these people versus that, everything could be summed up to this, is that as people, we have a desired outcome. We have something that we want to see happen. We have an idea of what would make life better, and there's an alignment to that. We try always to align ourselves to the future that we want. We're always assessing, like, how do we get where we want to go? Is this going to work? Is this plan going to produce the outcome? And the alignment issue is that when we're misaligned, we know that we're not getting where we want to go. Like, man, this sermon is really weird so far. Stick with me. We all have this desired outcome, and we have millions of reasons why or how we justify that desired outcome. We need a better system. We need a better president. We need a better government. We need better rules. We need better enforcement, because if we had that, then this would happen. And if this would happen, then that would happen. And we sit on the sidelines, and we're constantly throwing our opinions. I tell you what the church needs to do. I tell you what that pastor should do. We are opinionated people, and I love opinionated people. I don't want that to change. But it's almost like we have voted ourselves as the architects of the future. We could organize the best future if we just got what we wanted. We don't just do that. We're starting a series right now. We're starting a series, and the concept, and I haven't given it a name because I'm not a real preacher, but like the concept is that we need to have a better alignment. We need better alignment. We need to align ourselves better, because what happens if not is that we're constantly trying to call God into our future concepts. We're constantly trying to bring God. God's over here and we're over here. God's wanting us to do this and we're wanting to do that. And there's this constant struggle of like, God, come this way. And just like that water reel, things feel bound up and stopped because God is not honoring our canon of expectation. I would be a rich man if I had $1. You ever heard that? If I had $1 for every time, if I had $1 for every time I felt frustrated towards God for not just answering one simple request. God, why couldn't you have given me a little more talent in this area? Why couldn't you have given me a little more ability over here? Why couldn't you cause people to do this? Why couldn't you cause my circumstances to be that? God, please, I'll be okay if you will just. And how many times God has willfully and purposefully disappointed me. And I'm just like you. We're all the same. I have this idea of like, this is where the future needs to be. This is where we need to go. We're constantly, let me say it this way, and we're going to dive into the scripture. We're constantly guilty of trying to align God to our goals. We try to align people to our goals. We try to align the government to our goals. We try to align the system to our goals. We're constantly trying to bring everything in, not to everyone's benefit, specifically generally to our own. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 4. In 2 Kings chapter 4, it says, the wife of a man from the company of prophets cried out to Elisha and said, your servant, my husband, is dead. Now, let me tell you something. In this day and age, being a widow was not a good place to find yourself. You did not want to be a widow because you had no one to vouch for you. You talk about systematic oppression. This is a woman who had no power and no one to protect or vouch for her, to give her a name. She was socially uncovered, so to speak. She was exposed. She was vulnerable. She says, my husband is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. So he's from the company of prophets. He's a minister that found himself buried in debt and then died and left his family with debt. Leaders, pastors, men, listen to this story. He was so focused on the work of the Lord that he left his family in a lurch, left him in debt, left him with nothing. You know that he revered the Lord, but now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves. Can we try? I know this is hard because we're Americans and we live in the greatest country on the planet. Cue the amens, I know. Greatest country on the planet. And you go, well, we've got problems. Every country has problems. Every country has things they look back on and go, oof, should have done that better. But one of the defining factors of the U.S. that I am so proud of is that we're constantly trying to realign and trying to improve. The reason we're having arguments is because we're making an effort to improve. This lady, her husband dies, leaves her in debt, and they're going to take her 2 boys as slaves. You don't understand the oppression that this lady is under. And so to be fair, we're going to try to understand her position for the sake of the sermon. We're going to try to understand where she was, but if you're an American, you won't get it because you live in an amazing country that is working on improving and making opportunities for less fortunate people. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox. Sometimes you just need a little bit of perspective. It's hard to imagine somebody more disadvantaged, someone that is disadvantaged. She has no advantages. In fact, everything in life is working against her. She's a woman. She's a widow. She's up to her eyeballs in debt, and she is literally about to lose her sons. I think of my wife. I think of Lacey. If somebody was going to take Jet and take him into slavery because of my mistakes. So as a man, I almost can connect to this story more because I would feel responsible, like that this was my fault. I've messed up, and I've left my family in a bad position. This lady isn't even ordinary. She's not even ordinary. She is far less than ordinary. Ordinary for her would have been a promotion. She's under ordinary. She is subordinary. She is ordinary with parentheses around it. Nothing causes more complacency than believing. Listen, church, please hear me. If you're listening online, God can speak to you in this message regardless of whether you're here in person. I know that the buy-in seems to be happening more in person than online. People are like, oh, we like it, we listen. But I want you to know that if you're listening online, what I'm about to say, whether you hear it in person from my mouth to your ears or whether you hear it through a screen, this is true. The church tends to find itself in complacency when we believe we aren't special enough, when we're not talented enough, when we don't have a big enough following that we could never be useful, that we could never be the people we want to be. Why? Because we have this idea, this goal, this alignment that if I could get there, then I would be special. God, why can't you get me to where I want to go? I'll use it for you. I'll be rich for you, Jesus. And yet we hear that God constantly is telling us stories through the lives of ordinary people. Amazing stories always happen to someone else. Oh, I'm just a person. I just get up and go to my work. I'm going to tell you this. Ready for this? Bold statement, hot take. Ready for this one? Ready for this hot, argumentative, going to cause some eyebrows to raise take, but here's my opinion. The superstar standard The standard of super talented, super great singers, super great speakers, super talented, super rich, super popular, all the superstar standard has crippled more Jesus followers than sin. See, people who follow Jesus, they recover from sin issues. They tell some of the most beautiful stories about Jesus when they've experienced sin and they've been redeemed. Some of the most beautiful stories about Jesus are told from people who've been through terrible past, and God brings them out of it. But when you start to believe that God only uses the superstars, you stop, and that cripples us as followers of Christ. It is so vitally important to know that your standard and God's standard don't always match. Oh, God could use me if I was this way. I'm just sitting in a church. Nobody even knows I'm here. I've been going here for 4 years and I don't even know the pastor. I'm sorry. Verse 2. Elisha, she says, I'm in trouble. I'm in a bind. It's over for me. I am crippled by my circumstances. I am crippled by my position in life. Elisha replied to her, how can I help you? Tell me. Instantly, there's a compassion. There's this compassion that says, how can I help you? So he goes into like, okay, this matters. I'm taking your problem on. Okay, all right, let's see. Let's go. What do you have? Tell me, what do you have in your house? She said, your servant has nothing there at all. What do you have? I'm just ordinary. I'm just poor. I just have a normal job. I don't live in a nice house. I don't drive a nice car. I don't have the perfect marriage. I don't have anything, nothing at all. I'm unusable. I'm useless. But then she follows it up with, except a small jar of olive oil. She tells us where she believes herself to be. She tells us what she believes to be true. What she believes to be true is the story is over. I have so little. Church, please hear me on this. Please make an effort to hear this point. She's saying, I have so little that even what I have amounts to nothing. I thought life was going to go this way, but now it went this way, and if it goes this way, I'm out. My story's over. Life is already dead to me because I thought I was going that way. I am not finding alignment with my goals or my dreams or my future or my desired outcome. Everything I wanted is gone. Life is over. I have nothing except a small jar of oil, but that doesn't matter because I need more than a small jar of oil to get where I wanted to go. I have so little that what I have amounts to nothing. Verse 3, Elisha said, go around and ask your neighbors for empty jars. Don't just ask for a few. I love this sermon. I'm going to tell you, I love this sermon. I got so excited writing it. I was more excited to preach this sermon than I've been in a long time because of one word. One word. There's one word that just blows this sermon wide open. If you're listening and going, where are we going with all this? We've talked about sprinklers and all kinds of fun stuff. Here's where it is. He doesn't say, go find containers, he specifically says, go find empty jars. Don't just ask for a few. Listen, if we found ourselves in her position, we would feel the same way she felt. If we were about to lose our kids to slavery and we were broke and our spouse was gone and life was over, we would feel like she feels. I know us well enough, even the most optimistic, even the most Robert Buckner-esque type people, they're going to feel it. Maybe they're not going to show it. Maybe we're not going to admit it. Maybe we're not going to sit down and say it's over. But on the inside, when we're looking at the circumstances, it would be so easy to feel the way that she felt. What did I do wrong? What turn did I miss? What about this one? Is God mad at me? Am I just a failure? Am I just too painfully ordinary? Am I so anonymous to the world? What did I do wrong? How did I find myself here? What did we miss? What we would miss and what she missed was a hidden advantage. You're like, wait a minute, what? She had an advantage. This woman, at the end of her rope, at the end of her road, who had given up, who had decided that life was over, she had an advantage. But the problem is, like most of us, we only think of advantage or disadvantage in terms of our goals. Woo-hoo-hoo. We think that when we aren't getting where we wanted to go, we see that as a disadvantage. This lady had an advantage, but she was so locked on to her desired outcome, she was unable to see what we miss also, and that was she was the sole proprietor of a giant advantage. She was miles ahead of those around her, but she didn't know where to look. Why? Because her advantage didn't come packaged in all the ways that we're taught to look. See, we're taught to look for advantages: money, looks, age, gender, wealth, surplus, the cars we drive, the houses that we live in, the jobs that we have, the amount of followers on social media. We've got this generalized version of what it means to be successful, and so we check the boxes. Am I doing it? Am I doing it? Am I doing it? However, just side note, if you look at those people, are those people happy? Is it possible that we have bought a lie about what it means to be advantaged or disadvantaged? See, her advantage didn't come packaged in a traditional sense. You're sitting in here and listening, whether you're listening at home, whether you're listening on your couch, whether you're listening in a group of people, if you're in a gathering, if you're in Silver Lake at the Cowboy Dinner Tree, shameless plug, no matter where you are, you will possess advantages. Every single one of us possess an advantage if we know where to look. She had no wealth. She had no husband. Hey, listen, you want to talk about systematic stuff. She was in a system that required protection, and she didn't have a husband. She didn't have a system that was working for her. She had no more options. She didn't see it because she didn't know where to look. You go, what are you talking about, Jordan? What are you talking about? Remember, Elisha said, go get an empty jar. Go find empty jars and not just a few. Go find jars that have nothing in them. What's that? It's a hint. It's a clue. Blues Clues. Anybody ever raise kids? There's a clue. Go find empty jars. Why do I need empty jars? Because in the empty jar, you'll find your advantage. What are you talking about? Her advantage was her desperation. What? What did I say? She was desperate enough to operate in her advantage. Sometimes desperation is our greatest advantage. Sometimes when we get to the end of ourselves, we get to the end of our rope, we see no way forward. That is the moment where we discover the advantage of God in our lives. And we go, wait a minute, maybe I'll never get to my goals, but maybe God is bringing me to a place where I am actually perfectly aligned to accomplish His goals in my life. See, we always think of an advantage of am I going to get where I want to go? No, not always. Not everybody gets the advantage of going where they want to go. But those people tend to be not very happy in the end anyway. But God is saying you are perfectly positioned and aligned and equipped and prepared to take off running. You know what a train with no rails looks like? A statue. It needs rails. It needs alignment. A train requires alignment. It can only go where the rails have been built. And in every one of our lives, God has rails that are built, but we're stopped because we're looking this way, and God's going, just run on the rails I've created for you. Elisha said, go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. That means she had neighbors. That means she had people. There were other people. That means that Elisha could have gone to other people. If God wanted to operate with somebody that was less desperate, they were there. There were people available to God, but God needed the one that was the most desperate. God was going to tell a story with somebody that was the most desperate, that was the most likely to take off down the rails. The miracle required space that can only be found in lack. I hope I'm explaining this. I hope I'm putting this in words that are understandable. The miracle required space. See, and when we have a surplus, we don't have any extra space. If we have space, we fill it up with something. We need jet skis. We need a new boat. We need a new truck or a trailer or horses. We need more cattle. Shut up, everybody who knows me. We try to fill empty space. We try to fill our empty time. We're always trying to fill our lives up. And God's going, I've got a miracle that requires empty space. And so many times when God creates an empty space, it feels like punishment. It feels like a what? Disadvantage. The minute we see space in someone's life, we call it a disadvantage. Elisha says, go specifically seek out what? Space. Go seek out space that's big enough, an empty space that is big enough to contain the advantage that you didn't know you had. Oh, we need a superstar. How can we see this today? How can we put this in a way that we could explain? And one of my favorite stories, I just read it this year. There's a book, I've talked about it already. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell. It's David and Goliath. And it's not biblically accurate, but it does tell some cool stories. And there's an immigrant from Bombay, India. He moved here when he was 17. He was a businessman. He's got a cool story. His name is Vivek Ranadive. I didn't spell it how it's spelled. I had to spell it in a way that I could remember how to pronounce it. But you're not looking at my notes yet. Vivek Ranadive, he'd immigrated to the U.S., and out of nowhere, Vivek's daughter decides she wants to play basketball. She's in middle school, and she wants to play basketball, and he'd been looking for ways to spend more time with her. We're trying to figure out, remember, telling this story, we're trying to figure out how sometimes the disadvantages turn out to be our advantages. The alignment that we can't create for ourselves turns out to be alignment towards God. Just like this water reel, we're so bound up that we're going nowhere until we align, and the minute we align, we take off. So he wanted to spend more time with his daughter. And so he'd never even touched a basketball. He said he'd never seen basketball. He'd never been around it. He knew nothing about basketball, nothing. And here's what's worse. They were from the heart of Silicon Valley, and that means the girls on the basketball team were not these big, athletic, rough and tumble type people. They said, his description, he said, they're little blonde girls from the heart of Silicon Valley, daughters of computer programmers. 6 out of 8 had never played basketball. Can you imagine a greater disadvantage? From the outside looking in, can you imagine looking at Vivek Ranadive from Bombay, India, and his daughter and her little blonde computer programmer genetic friends, and they've never played basketball. You know, they're doing the you know, everybody's ever seen somebody not play basketball. And he's like, well, here's our team. Can you imagine a bigger disadvantage? With zero knowledge of basketball, he'd played cricket, he'd played soccer, he'd been around sports, but he'd never been around basketball. 6 out of the 8 girls had never played basketball. There had never been a concept. We can't imagine this is the Bad News Bears, but for girls basketball. And there's just, hey, you know what? Have fun. Isn't that what you tell people that are really bad at something? Hey, we're just doing this for fun. Just have fun. You're like, that sounds like a terrible coach. I'll admit, I'm not a good one. Let me read you an excerpt. He said, he was puzzled by the way Americans played basketball. So remember, he's coming in with a disadvantage. He's coming in completely misaligned from the goals that everybody would have had for basketball. Everybody's going this way. He's coming from this way. And they're going, well, we'll try to teach you the game. And so he was confused. He would never forget the first time he saw basketball. This is from the New York Times report. This is a story they wrote about him. He thought it was mindless. He watched basketball and goes, this is brainless. Is there a rule that says that you only get to play defense on half of the floor? They go, no, technically you can play it anywhere, but, that's just how basketball's played. You score, you run to the other end, wait on the defense. A team would score, then immediately retreat to its own end of the court. Team B would inbound the ball and dribble it into Team A's end, where Team A was patiently waiting. Then the process would reverse itself. A basketball court was 94 feet long, but most of the time the team defended only about 24 feet of that, conceding the other 70 feet. So what he's saying is, wait a minute, we're not athletic, we're not talented, and we don't know how to play basketball. And you're asking us to go to the end and wait for them to set up a play to execute this play against us? They're like, well, that's just the rules. That's the thing. That's why you need to have big athletic players. That's why you need advantaged players that have got skill, and you need to know the intricacies of basketball. And he goes, I don't have those advantages. I've got the opposite of those advantages. What I've got is a surplus of disadvantage. We're painfully ordinary. Church, please stop writing yourself out of stories because you think you're too ordinary. Good teams, after all, they said, had players who were tall and could dribble. That's funny. That's the standard. Like, oh, man, we're going up against a team who can dribble. You can't? You want to just call the game? Throw the white towel in. They could dribble and shoot well. They could crisply execute their carefully prepared plays in their opponent's end. Why, then, did weak teams play in a way that made it so easy for good teams to do the very thing that made them so good? So here's what he did. I'll skip the details, but here's what Vivek Ranadive decided. We are going to contest the inbounds pass. When they throw, because that's one area you can accurately defend. They can't dribble. You can't go around the player. So we'll just put somebody on this end. We're going to be really well conditioned. We have to be really well conditioned. Why? Because we're desperate. For this to work, we've got to overemphasize some of these other areas. We're going to defend. We're going to go full court press. We're going to defend the entire floor. And what they found was that these teams didn't prepare for that sort of a disadvantaged approach. He took his daughter's team with 6 girls who'd never played basketball. He never raised his voice. He was kind. He talked about attitude. He talked about all the things like, that doesn't matter. And he beat good team after good team after good team. Vivek Ranadive took that team to a national championship game. How? His point was, The advantaged players weren't looking for new opportunities. They saw themselves as being good enough to win through traditional methods. We're already good. We're tall. We know how to do terrible, awful, great, glorious maneuvers. You're not going to believe this. We can dribble. And he goes, we can't. So we're going to take that desperation and we're going to apply it to new methods. And they began to beat teams that thought they were good enough because their advantage turned out to be a disadvantage. And Vivek's team realized that their disadvantage began to play into their advantage. Why? They knew they were desperate. See, we're all desperate. It's just that we don't always feel it. Sometimes life is going good enough. They're like, yeah, we're good. We're just going to go the traditional route. And yet what we see is so many times God finds these just painfully ordinary people and he tells amazing stories. Why? Because they're the ones that are desperate enough to play along. See, and playing along is a choice. Choice is something that you don't get taken away from you. God's going, I want to tell an amazing story through your life, and you get to choose to be a part of that. And so many people choose to pass. No, I'm good. I kind of got a thing I'm working on, God. Why don't you come to where I'm at? God goes, no. And they're like, then we'll just circle back. Desperate people, ordinary people, normal people, poor people, struggling people, people that have experienced suffering, people that are coming out of addiction, people that are coming out of all sorts of terrible histories. When God says, hey, do you want to? Yes. Yeah. I didn't finish my sentence. You don't have to. If you want to do something with me, they had the advantage of desperation. Elisha said, go around and ask all your neighbors for what? Full jars? Money? See, that's what, go ask your neighbors for money. Go ask your neighbors for the end result so that God doesn't have to be a part of it. He said, no, go ask your neighbors for empty jars. Create a space. Allow your disadvantage to become your advantage. Your desperation is about to propel you into a really cool experience. What would have happened if Elisha would have just walked into a regular person, just a regular person on the street? Hey, how you doing? I'm Elisha. Nice to meet you. Hey, what's up? Hey, go to your neighbors and get all the empty jars. They'd have been like, I don't have time. I'm doing some stuff. The same miracle was probably available to every person in the town, but who did God choose? God chose the person who was the most likely to say anything at this point. I don't need alignment. I'm so far away from what I thought life was going to be. I'm so lost compared to what I thought life was going to do or produce. Bring me into alignment with you. Let's go with what you want. That requires a certain level of disadvantage because if you were advantaged, you wouldn't take such crazy steps. Go collect empty jars. God needed someone ordinary enough to try whatever the prophet said. He needed the cardboard cutout, the guy that walks in and feels like nobody sees him, the guy that says, I don't feel like I've got a lot of connections. I don't feel like I have a lot to bring to the table. And let me tell you that the enemy will tell you, then don't say anything, just hide. You don't want to be exposed because you're nothing special. And what God is saying is there's nothing more special than someone who's willing to follow me. That is the measurement. That's how we measure extraordinary people, is people who are willing to align themselves to the goals that God has. Let's go to Mark. Let's go to Mark chapter 1. We're almost done. I want to wrap this up because I love when we find something in the Old Testament and then we find it in the New Testament. It tells us more about the nature of God. Jesus starts his ministry in Galilee. It's the heart. This is the heart of ordinary. These are not the heart of Silicon Valley tech geniuses. These are just salt of the earth, not even really necessarily, it doesn't say great people. It doesn't say smart people. It doesn't say they were talented. It says there was actually a lot of Gentiles in this northern mountainous region of Galilee. It says it was just sort of unexceptional. You walk through and nothing really draws you to this group of people, and it says that's where Jesus started. That in and of itself is a pretty good indicator. Pagan worship had started to take over in Galilee. Galilee is one of those places that it was kind of like, how do people live here? And then you meet them and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Where else are they going to go? Center of pagan worship. Let me say this. It was an entire culture of ordinary. It wasn't that there was ordinary people there. It was that ordinary was the expectation. Ordinary is almost the demand. Have you ever been places like this where you see someone trying to really strive to accomplish more and the whole town's kind of like, settle down. That kind of stuff doesn't happen here. We're not those kind of people. You just sit back here, get back in line with us. You can only go at the pace that we're moving. Stop. It's not going to work anyway. That was Galilee. Mark chapter 1. Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw Simon and his brother Andrew putting a net into the sea. Ordinary people, ordinary fishermen. Verse 17, Jesus said to them, follow me and I will make you fish for men. Now, if Jesus were to have walked up to anyone Pharisee, name one Pharisee, Jesus said, hey, if you'll follow me, let down your life, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. If Jesus would have found a social media influencer, if Jesus would have found a billionaire, if Jesus would have found all these different people, they are actually, listen, ready? People who were advantaged would have found themselves at a disadvantage when it comes to aligning to the greatest call given to human people, which is to follow and walk with God on the earth. The greatest offer ever extended to people, they would have been disadvantaged to see it because they had so much else going on. Jesus, in a culture of ordinary, in a region of ordinary, in a call that was ordinary, says, drop what you're doing and follow me. And they're like, yeah. Could you have done that? Could I have done that? If Jesus were to walk by, and I don't know that he's Jesus, he just seems like, hey, something's going on here. Hey, give up your life and follow me. If we're being honest, I don't know, Jesus. Have you heard of the 1017 Project? It's going pretty good. Have you seen these people at Shiloh Ranch? Have you seen our online numbers? See, the success is the disadvantage. Verse 18, at once, Mark's writing style, all at once, they left their nets and followed him. Let me tell you this, people. I don't care where you're listening from. Actually, it's probably more important the less known you feel, the more ordinary you feel, the more underexcited that you are about your place in life, the more disappointed you've been by life. Can I say it that way? The more that life has disappointed you, the more likely you are to hear what I'm about to say. And that is a culture of ordinary people is a rich soil. It is a soil that is so nutrient rich because it prepares some of the most heroic Bible characters that we get to read their stories in the Word. They didn't come from extraordinary circumstances. God plucks ordinary people out of the rich soil of ordinary culture. Why? They're the most likely to play along. I'm going to end it with this. Here we are. We're almost done. But try to hear this point. We're talking about alignment. When you are aligned and you're rigidly aligned to your vision and your success and your goals, you are at a disadvantage to hear what God wants to do in your life. It's not possible. We saw people that did it. We see Nicodemus sneaking over at night. Why? Because he was at a disadvantage. He's trying to overcome his disadvantage because he was a powerful person. He had a lot to lose. When you encounter God, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised when you encounter God and he starts by stripping you of the things that you love the most. I wish I could tell you it was different. I wish you could come to God and he enhanced or fertilizes the things that you're most passionate about. So often you come to God and he takes away the things that you love the most. Why? He's creating space for miracles. He's creating space. He's taking your jars that he's emptying. He was like, this has to have space. We need space. We need space. We need space. We need space. It says that the lady started pouring the oil, and it didn't stop. It didn't stop until what? She was pouring the oil until what? She ran out of space. The miracle stopped when the space stopped. When the empty jars were full, when the capacity had been reached, when there was no more room for a miracle, the miracle stopped. When there was no more room, when there was no more empty space or disadvantage for her to fill with the miracles of God, with the presence of God. What was the oil? The oil was always the anointing, the blessings of God. And the blessings of God stopped when the room for them ran out. And so when you come to God and he begins to take away the things that you love the deepest, what he's doing is, first of all, he's addressing idols. That's just what he does because they're harmful for us. But he's creating space for himself. And wealthy or special or talented people get the most insulted when they don't get what they want. Why? Because society rewards special people. We celebrate them. They're the superstars. Oh, this is so great. This is so awesome. And they get used to that. So when God encounters them, he begins to take things away. They feel like that God's oppressing them. Here's the advantage of ordinary people. Here's the alignment that is easier for ordinary people is that when God takes something away, maybe something that they valued or that they loved, growing up poor, growing up disadvantaged, growing up having people take advantage of you and not being able to defend yourself, all the things that the Bible talks about that the poor have to suffer. When we lose something that we care about the deepest, God takes something away, the ordinary person's actual reaction is more like, I'm not saying that right, they're more inclined, let's say it that way, more inclined, less words, better clarity. When you take something away from somebody who has already given up on their own goals, and God comes in and goes, I'm going to need this, the ordinary, the poor, the disadvantaged are more likely to go, okay. The most talented, the most celebrated, the most special people go, then I don't want what you're offering if I have to give up self. God goes, I'm trying to create space for a miracle. And they go, we don't want a miracle. We just want you to give us more full jars. It's like that water reel. The water reel's pointing this way and the hose is going that way, and we're bound up and we're stopped and we can't figure out why life isn't more fulfilled. And it's because we are a train trying to make our own tracks across the desert. God's going, I'm offering you tracks and alignment and a goal and a purpose, and I want to do amazing things. And it's actually the culture of ordinary people that create some of the most heroic people. It might even be this. People who have never faced disappointment are more likely to collapse when disappointment comes. People who have never had to face disappointment before, when life doesn't go the way that they go, when they have to permanently give up on something that they wanted, they're more likely to collapse. Why? Because they're more disadvantaged. I love the grittiness that comes with just ordinary blue-collar, salt-of-the-earth people. They've got calluses on their hands, calluses on their hearts. They're tough people. They can face disappointment and go, that's not what I wanted, but it's not fatal. I love blue-collar people. There's a story about a guy who cut his finger off at a team roping and didn't go to the hospital till the roping was over because he was placing. Where are those people? People that go, not what I wanted, but I'm here. Look at the advantage. Look at the advantage of somebody who goes, hey, I'm out. They're about to take my kids. And Elisha goes, go find an empty jar. And she's like, whatever. At this point, whatever. What could be worse than what I'm already facing? And the choice of obedience opens the doors to alignment, to a life that we couldn't have created for ourselves. The series that we're going into is the alignment found in disadvantage. The alignment that we find in moments of being disadvantaged. Don't let the enemy tell you that you're too ordinary, you're too anonymous, nobody knows your name, nobody knows your story, you don't have enough pull, you don't have enough wealth, whatever the case may be, because those things create a hurdle. You can get over them, you can get past them. If you're wealthy, you're not, it's not a death sentence, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying, just know that your human advantage often creates a spiritual disadvantage. You know who gives? You know the people most likely to give when they come to church? People who have the least. How do you explain that? We have team ropings. This is just personal. You're like, you're going to bring this into this part of the sermon? I thought we were kind of winding down. We are. I had a talk with one of the most powerful figures in the sport of team roping, and he said, I get so tired of dealing with the open team ropers. That's like the higher numbered guys, the professional team ropers. I get so tired because they expect everything. The low-numbered guys, they're just happy to be there. They just enjoy the process. They have more fun at a team roping than the open guys. The open guys have this unrealistic expectation. They're never happy. He goes, the low-numbered guys, they come in, they're high-fiving each other, they're rooting for each other. The culture of ordinary creates heroes. If you go, I'm just from an ordinary family, I'm just from an ordinary town, good news, you're at an advantage. The quicker you can give up on what you feel owed and pursue what God is offering, take off down the rails. Let's pray. Lord, this sounds nice, but this is a hard concept to believe. Lord, every time we look around, every time we turn on the TV, every time we look at social media, we are just inundated with talent and special and wealth and all the things that the world says creates happiness. To actually deep down believe that just the blue-collar, ordinary approach to life, God, that's where we find our greatest spiritual advantages. That, God, you tell some of your most heroic stories through people that are the most desperate. God, it's our desperation that creates the advantage. God, help us to be people who, as we consider this, are able to start believing it. It's a hard thing to understand. It's a hard thing to grasp. But God, it's almost like we fail into success. When we address failure, when we address lack, when we start looking for open spaces, when we are not perfectly achieving everything we wanted to achieve, that God, it's those people, it's those moments that have the most advantage, because we're the most likely to abandon what we're doing, just like Simon and Andrew. Just leave what we're doing and say, okay, yeah, we'll follow you, whatever you say. God, help us to seek out the advantage that we have. Pray in Jesus' name, amen.
God, we thank you for this moment of worship with you. God, we know that you're closer than a brother, you're closer than a friend. God, we thank you for the blessings that you pour over us every single day. We love you and we worship you. In your precious name we pray. Amen. All right, well, we are here to say goodbye, to sign off for the week. Just a few reminders. We have up in the comments some ways to give to Shiloh Ranch. Also, just continue to share what we've been posting, whether it's the stream from today that you're still watching right now that you can share even still so that friends and family can come back and watch it later. Levi, you want to talk about our YouTube as well?
Well, if you go to YouTube and search Shiloh Ranch Church or the 1017 Project and hit that subscribe and bell button, it helps us out greatly.
Yeah. And everything that you see today or you've seen in the past or things that we'll show in the future will be available on our YouTube page. So that's a great resource if you ever want to watch during the week. Just head to our YouTube page. But I think that's all we have for today.
Beans.
Yeah, we're so glad that you guys were able to make it. And we will see you next week as always. Bye, guys.
See you later.